Mastering English. You guys sent us this popular English learning channel's advice.
Okay.
And honestly, I'm already kind of intrigued by some of the strategies.
Yeah.
It's not just the usual, like, practice makes perfect stuff.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot more nuance here
Okay.
than you might expect.
Okay.
Fluency does, of course, take time and dedication, but
Right.
what we're going to unpack today, I think, are the specific methods and mindsets that can accelerate your progress.
I love it. Okay.
Yeah.
So the first thing that kind of caught my eye was this this focus on daily routines. And they really emphasize this little and often approach.
Yes.
Suggesting even just 10 minutes a day can make a difference.
Right.
Have you found that to be true in your experience with language learners?
Absolutely. It's less about cramming and more about consistent exposure.
Okay.
Think of it like building a muscle. You know, short, regular workouts are more effective than like one intense session every now and then.
I like that.
So the key here is to like integrate English into your existing routines.
Okay.
Make it a natural part of your day.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like how they say the best exercise is the one you'll actually do, right?
Yeah.
So instead of feeling overwhelmed by trying to block out hours, it's about finding those pockets of time, you know, where you can sprinkle in some English practice.
Exactly. Maybe it's listening to a podcast while you walk the dog.
Yeah.
Maybe reading a news article in English before bed.
Okay.
Or even just changing the language settings on your phone.
Like it.
It's those small, consistent actions that compound over time.
I like it. All right. So we kind of got the when figured out, but what about the how the channel recommends just tons of free resources, apps, YouTube channels, website. It's kind of overwhelming.
It can be a lot.
Where do you even suggest people begin with all this stuff?
Well, it's important to remember that not every resource will be like a perfect fit for every learner.
Okay.
Right? What works for one person might not click for another.
Sure.
So I always recommend starting with a bit of self-reflection. Think about your learning style. You know, are you visual, auditory, kinesthetic? Do you prefer structured lessons or more gamified approaches?
Right.
Once you have a sense of your preferences, you can start exploring resources that align with those strengths.
That's great advice. Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the hype of a particular app or channel.
Yeah.
But ultimately it needs to fit, you know, your individual learning style.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, one tip that really surprised me was this.
Okay.
The idea of talking to yourself in English.
Oh, yeah?
I've caught myself doing this occasionally, but I always felt a little silly about it.
Yeah.
But the channel actually recommends this as like a legitimate practice technique.
Absolutely.
So what's the thinking behind that?
Well, it might feel strange at first, but there's a real psychological benefit to vocalizing the language.
Okay.
Yeah. I liken it to athletes doing visualization exercises.
Right.
You know, even without a physical opponent, they're training their minds and bodies to react instinctively.
Yeah, I see.
So have you found that this kind of mental rehearsal translates to more confident conversations in real life?
You know, now that you mention it, yeah.
Yeah.
There have been times when I've like mentally rehearsed certain phrases or scenarios in English, and it definitely helped me feel more prepared and less flustered when I actually had to use them.
Exactly.
It's almost like pre-programming your brain for success.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be anything elaborate.
Okay.
You can narrate your daily routine, have imaginary conversations, or even just practice pronouncing difficult sounds.
Okay.
The key is to get comfortable with the act of speaking English, even if it's just to yourself.
I like that. All right, so we've tackled daily routines, we've explored resources, and even embraced the power of self-talk.
Wow. But what about the essential skill of listening?
Yes.
I know that was a big part of the channel's advice.
Absolutely. They emphasize the importance of immersing yourself in the sounds of English.
Oh.
And they offered some specific recommendations for achieving that.
Oh.
Podcasts like The English We Speak are fantastic for getting accustomed to different accents and conversational styles.
Yeah.
And don't underestimate the power of movies and TV shows, especially with subtitles.
Right.
They can be a really enjoyable way to absorb vocabulary and grammar in context.
I'm a big fan of subtitles myself, even when watching content in my native language.
Yeah.
I find it helps me catch nuances and pick up new vocabulary without even realizing it.
Absolutely.
The channel even suggested starting with simpler content like children's cartoons.
That's a great strategy, especially for beginners.
Yeah.
Children's programs often use clear, simple language, and the visuals provide helpful context.
Right.
Plus, let's be honest, cartoons can be entertaining at any age. They really can. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already. Establishing routines, finding the right resources, practicing self-talk and immersing ourselves in English through listening.
It's a lot, yeah.
What's next on our language learning journey?
Well, we can't forget about building a strong vocabulary.
Okay.
Which is another key theme from the channel's advice.
Right.
They recommended a few different strategies, and what I appreciated is that they acknowledged that vocabulary acquisition doesn't have to be dry and tedious.
Yes, they talked about the Word of the Day challenge, which is a classic.
Classic.
But always effective.
Absolutely.
And they even suggested this fun visual technique, labeling household items in English.
Yeah.
It's like turning your home into a giant English vocabulary game.
Yeah. It's a brilliant way to make learning more engaging and memorable.
I love that.
Yeah. And what's really impactful here is the emphasis on writing in English daily.
Okay.
Even if it's just a few sentences in a journal.
You know, I've heard that advice before, but I've always struggled to make it a habit. What's the real benefit of incorporating writing, especially when the ultimate goal is fluency in spoken English?
Well, writing reinforces learning and helps you connect vocabulary with grammar.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about active engagement with the language.
Right.
Not just passive absorption.
Okay.
Think of it like taking notes in a class.
Right.
The act of writing things down helps solidify the information in your mind.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It's about actively processing the language rather than just letting it wash over you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we got routines, resources, self-talk listening, and now vocabulary building through writing.
A lot.
Yeah, I feel like we're building a solid foundation here.
Yeah.
What's the next layer?
Well, we can't shy away from the dreaded G-word grammar.
Oh, no.
I know it can seem daunting.
Yes.
But the channel's advice here is actually quite reassuring.
Okay.
They emphasize starting with the basics, simple tenses, common pronouns, and forming basic questions.
Okay.
It's about mastering the building blocks before moving on to more complex structures.
That makes sense. It's like building a house. You need a strong foundation before you start adding in the fancy details.
Exactly.
But grammar has always been my Achilles heel when it comes to language learning.
Sure.
Do you have any tips for approaching it in a way that feels less intimidating?
Yeah, I think the key is to shift your perspective.
Okay.
Instead of viewing grammar as a set of rigid rules, think of it as a puzzle to be solved.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, it's about understanding the logic behind the language.
Right.
Once you grasp those fundamental concepts, the rest starts to fall into place.
A puzzle to be solved.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got our foundation, we're building our vocabulary, and we're tackling grammar one puzzle piece at a time.
Coming together.
What's the next step in our language learning quest?
Well, all of these skills are ultimately leading up to the main event.
Ooh.
Having real conversations in English.
Okay.
The channel emphasizes the importance of practicing daily conversations.
Okay.
Even if it's just role-playing scenarios like ordering coffee.
Oh.
Or asking for direction.
I like it.
Yeah.
I can imagine myself standing in front of the mirror practicing how to order a latte with perfect pronunciation.
Yeah, exactly.
But seriously, I can see how that kind of role-playing could be really helpful.
Absolutely.
It's about preparing for real-world interactions, taking the fear out of the unknown.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of mastering greetings and polite phrases.
Okay.
Those seemingly small elements are essential for navigating social interactions smoothly.
Right.
The channel encourages seeking out opportunities to practice with native speakers or language partners,
Right.
which can really accelerate your progress.
Yeah.
But even practicing in front of a mirror or with a friend can make a world of difference.
Absolutely. All right, so we got routines, resources, self-talk, listening, vocabulary, building grammar practice.
It's a lot.
And now, the all-important conversational skills.
Yes.
It's starting to feel like a complete language learning toolkit.
It is.
But what about the mental and emotional aspects of this journey? It's easy to get discouraged, you know, especially when you hit those inevitable plateaus.
You're absolutely right. The channel addressed this as well, emphasizing the importance of staying motivated and celebrating small victories.
Right.
They also stress the importance of setting realistic goals,
Okay.
like learning a few new words a week or having a short conversation in English.
Right.
Progress isn't always linear, and that's okay.
That's such a good point. It's easy to get caught up in comparing ourselves to others or feeling like we're not progressing fast enough. But I love the reminder that every small step forward is a victory worth celebrating.
Absolutely.
It's those little wins that keep us going, right?
Absolutely. And what's often overlooked is the power of community.
Okay.
Yeah. Connecting with other learners can provide a sense of camaraderie, support, and motivation. So exploring online forums, language exchange platforms, or local meetups can introduce you to like-minded individuals who understand the challenges and triumphs of language learning.
That's so true. It's like having a cheerleading squad for your language learning journey.
Exactly.
Knowing that you're not alone in those struggles can make all the difference.
Absolutely.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
We've explored routines, resources, self-talk listening, vocabulary, grammar, conversation practice, and even the importance of community and celebrating those small victories.
A lot.
It's a lot to process.
It is.
What would you say is the overarching theme that's emerged so far?
Well, I think what's emerging is a holistic approach to language learning.
Okay.
It's not just about memorizing rules and vocabulary.
Right.
It's about integrating English into your life.
Right.
Finding joy in the process and connecting with others who share your passion.
And speaking of the journey,
Yeah.
I think one of the most powerful takeaways from the channel's advice is this emphasis on consistency and patience.
Absolutely.
They reiterate that even short bursts of daily practice can yield significant results over time. It's about making English a habit, not a chore.
I love that.
But in a world of instant gratification, patience can be a tough virtue to cultivate.
It can be, but it's absolutely essential for language learning. It's crucial to remember that mistakes are inevitable stepping stones to fluency.
Right.
Every learner stumbles along the way, and that's perfectly normal.
Sure.
So patience and self-compassion are key to staying motivated and enjoying the process.
So as we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, what would you say is the overarching theme that's emerged so far?
Well, I think it's the idea that effective language learning is accessible to everyone with the right mindset and approach.
I like that.
It's not about expensive resources or innate talent.
Okay.
It's about consistent effort, utilizing available tools, and maintaining a positive attitude.
I love it.
And that brings us to a crucial question for you to ponder.
Okay.
How do you envision mastering English enriching your life?
Ooh,
What possibilities would it unlock for you?
I like that.
Fluency isn't just about reaching a destination. It's about the journey of discovery and personal growth along the way.
I like it.
We'll explore these ideas further in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, looking forward to it.
It's fascinating to consider how language can open up new worlds for people you know personally and professionally.
Absolutely.
We were talking about the power of consistent practice,
Right.
but I think it's also important to find ways to make that practice enjoyable.
Okay.
The channel mentioned incorporating music into your learning,
Oh,
suggesting you sing along to your favorite English songs.
okay.
What are your thoughts on that?
You know, I actually love that idea.
Yeah.
Music has this incredible ability to just bypass our conscious filters and lodge itself right into our brains. It's how we learn those annoyingly catchy jingles, right?
Yeah, totally.
But instead of selling us products, we can use that same power to learn vocabulary and pronunciation.
Exactly. And by choosing songs you genuinely enjoy,
Yeah.
you're associating English with pleasure, making the learning process feel less like a chore and more like a fun activity.
I like it.
It becomes this natural way to immerse yourself in the rhythm and sounds of the language.
That makes me think of something else the channel mentioned.
Okay.
Testing yourself regularly to gauge your progress.
Right.
I know some people dread tests,
Yeah,
but they framed it as a way to celebrate how far you've come.
I like that.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be like a formal exam or anything.
Yeah.
It could be as simple as trying to summarize a news article you just read in English.
Yeah.
Or having a conversation with a language partner without relying on your native language.
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
Regular self-assessment helps you identify your strengths and weaknesses.
Okay.
It's about becoming more aware of your own learning process, noticing those areas where you're excelling and those where you might need a bit more focus.
Right.
And those moments of realization, those aha moments, can be incredibly motivating.
I can definitely see that it's like when you finally understand a grammar concept
Yes.
that's been tripping you up. Or when you realize you can follow a conversation in English without constantly translating in your head.
Right.
It's those little breakthroughs that make the journey so rewarding.
Absolutely.
Speaking of motivation, the channel emphasized the importance of maintaining a positive attitude, reminding us that it's okay to make mistakes.
Of course.
It's all part of the process.
That's such a valuable reminder.
Yeah.
Language learning can be a roller coaster of emotions.
Sure.
There will be moments of triumph and moments of frustration.
Right.
The key is to embrace those mistakes as opportunities for growth.
Okay.
They're not setbacks, they're signposts pointing you in the right direction.
I love that analogy, signposts pointing you in the right direction.
Yeah.
It takes the pressure off striving for perfection.
Exactly.
And allows us to embrace, the messy, imperfect beauty of the learning process. I'm also curious about your take on the channel's advice to focus on communication and fluency,
Okay.
rather than getting bogged down in perfectionism.
That's a point I feel very strongly about.
Yeah.
Language is ultimately a tool for connection.
Okay.
While accuracy is important, it shouldn't paralyze us.
Right.
The goal is to be able to express ourselves, to share ideas, to build relationships.
Yeah.
Sometimes that means letting go of the need for perfect grammar
Okay.
and embracing the spontaneity of real-life communication.
So it's about finding that balance between accuracy and fluency, right?
Exactly.
Knowing the rules, but not being afraid to bend them a little in the pursuit of meaningful connection.
Yes.
I'm also reminded of something I found helpful in my own language learning journey.
Okay.
Setting mini goals.
Yes.
Within the larger goal of fluency.
Love it.
It could be as simple as learning 5 new verbs this week.
Sure.
Or having a 5-minute conversation in English without switching back to my native language.
Yeah, it's an excellent strategy. Breaking down a large, daunting goal into smaller, more manageable chunks
Right.
can make the journey feel less overwhelming.
Sure.
Each mini goal you achieve becomes a stepping stone, boosting your confidence and propelling you forward.
Right.
It's like climbing a mountain.
Okay.
You focus on reaching the next base camp, not the distant summit.
I love that visual.
Yeah.
It's about finding those manageable milestones that keep us motivated and on track.
Absolutely.
And speaking of staying on track, the channel really emphasized the power of consistency over intensity.
Yes.
It's the small, consistent actions that create lasting change.
Absolutely. It's like the difference between sprinting and running a marathon.
Okay.
You might make quick initial progress with an intense burst of effort,
Right.
but it's that steady, consistent pace that will get you across the finish line.
And I think that applies to so many aspects of life, not just language learning.
Totally.
It's about building those habits.
Yeah.
Finding those small, sustainable actions that we can integrate into our daily lives.
I love that.
And speaking of life lessons, the channel made a point that really resonated with me.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyone can learn a new language.
Absolutely.
They emphasize that it's not about innate talent or special abilities.
I agree.
It's about dedication, perseverance, and a willingness to learn.
I wholeheartedly agree. We often get caught up in the idea of a language gene
Right.
or a natural aptitude for languages.
Sure.
But the truth is, learning a language is a skill, not a gift.
Yeah.
It's something anyone can achieve with the right mindset and approach.
That's so empowering. It takes the pressure off feeling like we need to be some kind of linguistic prodigy.
Exactly.
And reminds us that we all have the capacity to learn and grow.
Absolutely.
It's about believing in ourselves and embracing the challenge.
Yes, and I think it's also important to remember why we're learning the language in the first place.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Is it to travel, to connect with loved ones,
Right.
to advance your career, or simply for the joy of expanding your horizons?
Sure.
Having that clear purpose in mind can fuel your motivation and help you push through those inevitable moments of doubt.
That's such a good point. It's like having a compass
Yeah.
that keeps you oriented, reminding you of your destination even when the path gets a little rocky.
I love that.
And speaking of the path, the channel reminded us that language learning is a lifelong journey.
So true.
Yeah, it's not about reaching a destination and stopping.
Right.
It's about continually exploring, discovering, and expanding your linguistic horizons.
Absolutely.
Even once you've achieved fluency, there's always more to learn, more to discover, and more ways to grow.
That's the beauty of it.
I love that perspective. It's not a race to the finish line. It's an ongoing adventure.
I agree.
And another thing that struck me from the channel's advice is this emphasis on finding a language partner or a tutor to practice with.
Oh, yeah.
Having someone to bounce ideas off of, to correct your mistakes,
Right.
and to celebrate your successes can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. And there are so many options for finding language partners these days. There are online platforms, language exchange meetups, even just connecting with friends or colleagues who speak the language.
Right.
The key is to seek out those opportunities for authentic communication,
Okay.
to step outside of the textbook and into the real world of language in action.
And speaking of real-world experience, the channel encouraged listeners not to be afraid to experiment with different learning methods.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
There's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly.
So it's about finding what works best for you.
That's such a crucial point. What works for one person might not resonate with another.
Right.
Some people thrive with flashcards and grammar drills.
Sure.
While others prefer to learn through music and movies.
Right.
The beauty of language learning is that you can create a personalized approach that aligns with your unique learning style and interests.
So it's about becoming a language learning detective.
Yeah.
Experimenting with different tools and techniques until you find those that click.
I love that.
And, you know, one thing that's always helped me stay motivated is remembering why I'm learning the language in the first place.
Yeah.
Whether it's to travel to connect with people from different cultures or simply to challenge myself.
Sure.
Having that clear purpose in mind gives me that extra push when I need it most.
Having a sense of purpose is incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
It transforms the learning process from a chore into a journey towards something meaningful.
Right.
And it's that meaning, that sense of purpose that fuels our passion and sustains our efforts over time.
Right.
And speaking of sustaining efforts, one of the biggest challenges in language learning is overcoming the fear of making mistakes.
Oh, absolutely.
The channel touched on this as well, urging listeners to embrace those imperfections.
Right.
And to see them as valuable learning opportunities.
That's such an important message. I know from personal experience that the fear of making mistakes can be paralyzing.
It can be.
Yeah, it can keep us from speaking up, from trying new things,
Right.
from truly immersing ourselves in the language. But the channel reminded us that mistakes are not failures.
Right.
They're simply evidence that we're learning and growing.
Exactly. It's about shifting our perspective and viewing mistakes as feedback,
Okay.
as opportunities to refine our understanding and improve our skills.
Okay.
Each mistake we make is a chance to learn something new, to adjust our approach, and to move closer to fluency.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's about reframing those oops moments as valuable data points on our language learning journey.
Absolutely.
And speaking of data points, the channel also highlighted the importance of incorporating authentic materials into our learning.
Oh, yeah.
Such as books, articles, and movies created for native speakers.
Yes.
It's about moving beyond textbooks and immersing ourselves in the real-world nuances of the language.
That's a fantastic point.
Yeah.
Authentic materials expose us to the richness and complexity of the language as it's actually used. They provide us with context, with cultural insights,
Right.
with a deeper understanding of the subtle nuances that make a language come alive.
It's like stepping outside of the classroom and into the vibrant, dynamic world of language in action.
Yes.
And speaking of action, another crucial element that the channel emphasized is setting realistic goals.
Oh, for sure.
It's easy to get overwhelmed if we set our sights too high too soon.
Absolutely.
Instead, they suggested breaking down our goals into smaller, more manageable chunks.
That's such a powerful strategy.
Yeah.
It's about creating a sense of momentum, of achieving those smaller victories that fuel our motivation and keep us moving forward.
Right.
For example, instead of aiming to be fluent in a year,
Right.
maybe you set a goal of learning 10 new words a week,
Right.
or having a 5-minute conversation with a native speaker without resorting to your native language.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's about celebrating those small wins, those incremental steps that ultimately lead to greater fluency and confidence.
Absolutely.
And speaking of celebrations, the channel reminded us to acknowledge and appreciate our progress.
Yes.
It's easy to get caught up in the challenges and forget to pause and appreciate how far we've come.
That's such an important reminder.
Yeah.
It's about cultivating gratitude for our own efforts.
Right.
And recognizing that every step forward, no matter how small, is a victory worth celebrating.
Absolutely.
Whether it's mastering a new grammar rule, having a successful conversation, or simply sticking to our learning schedule.
Yeah.
Those small achievements are milestones on our language learning journey.
It's about shifting our focus from what we haven't yet accomplished
Right.
to what we have.
Yes.
To those moments of growth and those breakthroughs that mark our progress.
I love that.
And speaking of progress, the channel also emphasized the value of seeking feedback from others.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
Whether it's from a language partner, a tutor, or even a friend who speaks the language.
Of course.
Yeah.
Feedback is essential for growth.
Right.
It provides us with an outside perspective, helping us to see our strengths and weaknesses more clearly.
Okay.
It allows us to identify those areas where we're excelling and those where we might need to focus our efforts.
It's like having a mirror held up to our language skills, reflecting back to us those areas where we're shining and those where we might need a bit of polishing.
Exactly.
And, you know, another thing that's helped me tremendously in my language learning journey is incorporating it into my daily routine.
Well, that's a great idea.
It's about finding those small pockets of time throughout the day where I can squeeze in some practice.
That's a brilliant strategy.
Yeah.
By weaving language learning into our daily lives, it becomes less of a chore and more of a natural habit.
Right.
You could be as simple as listening to a podcast during your commute,
Yeah.
reading a news article in the target language during your lunch break,
Right.
or practicing conversation with a language partner in the evening.
Okay.
The key is to find ways to make language learning a seamless part of your day.
It's about finding those little moments where we can shift our minds into English mode, even if it's just for a few minutes at a time.
Exactly.
And those minutes add up.
We do.
Speaking of adding up, I think one of the most important things the channel emphasized is the need for patience.
Oh, absolutely.
Language learning is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes.
It takes time, effort, and a willingness to embrace the journey with all its twists and turns.
That's so true. And it's easy to get discouraged when we don't see results as quickly as we'd like.
Right.
But it's crucial to remember that every learner faces challenges. Every learner makes mistakes.
Sure.
And every learner experiences moments of doubt.
Yeah.
It's all part of the process.
It's about trusting the process, believing in ourselves, and remembering that fluency is not a destination, but a journey.
Beautifully said.
And speaking of journeys, the channel also reminded us to have fun along the way.
Oh, for sure.
They encourage listeners to find ways to make language learning enjoyable,
Yeah.
whether it's through music, movies, games, or simply connecting with friends who speak the language.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's such a vital point.
Yeah.
When we enjoy the process, we're more likely to stick with it, to persevere through those challenging moments,
Right.
and to ultimately achieve our goals.
Right.
So find what sparks your passion, what ignites your curiosity,
Yeah,
what makes you smile when you think about learning English,
I like it.
and bring that joy into your language learning journey.
I love that it's about finding the fun, the spark, the element of play that makes us eager to learn to explore, to connect.
Absolutely.
And, you know, another point the channel made that I found really empowering
Okay.
is this idea of not comparing ourselves to other learners.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's easy to fall into the trap of looking at someone else's progress and feeling inadequate.
It is.
Yeah.
But that's such an important reminder.
Yeah.
Comparing ourselves to others only serves to undermine our confidence and steal our joy.
Right.
It's far more productive to focus on our own progress, to celebrate our own achievements,
Right.
and to support our fellow learners along the way.
It's about creating a sense of community, of shared purpose, of collective growth.
I love that.
And speaking of community, the channel also emphasized the power of connecting with other language learners.
Yes.
Whether it's through online forums, language exchange meetups, or simply striking up conversations with people who speak the language.
Absolutely. The power of community cannot be overstated.
Yeah.
Connecting with others who are on the same journey
Right.
can provide us with support, encouragement, and a sense of belonging.
Totally.
It's inspiring to see others' progress, to share tips and strategies, and to celebrate each other's successes.
It's like having a cheerleading squad
Yes.
for our language learning adventures, a group of people who understand the challenges and the triumphs, the frustrations and the joys.
I love that.
And, you know, as we're wrapping up this second part of our deep dive,
Yes.
one theme that keeps coming back to me is the channel's emphasis on not giving up.
Oh, yeah.
Language learning can be challenging.
Absolutely.
There will inevitably be times when we feel discouraged or frustrated.
But it's important to remember why we started this journey in the first place.
That's such an empowering message.
Yeah.
It's about believing in ourselves, persevering through challenges, and never losing sight of the incredible rewards that await us at the end of this journey.
I like that.
And those rewards go far beyond fluency.
Right.
They encompass personal growth, expanded horizons, and a deeper connection to the world around us.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
It's about embracing the journey with all its ups and downs, knowing that each step we take, no matter how small, is a step closer to achieving our goals and unlocking those incredible rewards.
I love that.
It's amazing how learning a new language can be such a transformative experience. You know, it pushes us beyond our comfort zones and opens up all these possibilities.
It really does.
And you know what struck me as we've been diving into this channel's advice is that mastering English doesn't have to be this daunting, expensive endeavor.
Right.
They really emphasize that it's about consistent effort, utilizing readily available tools, and most importantly, maintaining a positive attitude.
I couldn't agree more. They've done a fantastic job of demystifying the process, showing that it's not about some innate talent or having access to exclusive resources.
Right.
It's about cultivating that mindset of dedication.
Right.
And embracing the journey, even with its inevitable bumps along the way.
Right. And speaking of the journey, they didn't just focus on the mechanics of language learning.
Yeah.
They really highlighted how mastering English can unlock these incredible opportunities.
Yes.
Whether it's through travel, connecting with diverse cultures, or even advancing your career.
It's about so much